Dr. Owen Carver adjusted his comlink and tried to ignore the flutter in his chest as the ship approached the Arinvian capital. It wasn't every day that humanity was invited to negotiate face-to-face with an alien civilization, one that had, until recently, regarded them with little more than icy formality. Owen had spent years in the field, studying extraterrestrial languages and customs, but this assignment was different. This was his chance to make first contact personal, tangible. Yet as the city's crystalline spires grew larger on the ship's view screen, he realized he'd never felt less prepared. "Owen, stop fiddling with that thing and help me pack the equipment," called Lieutenant Daniel Shaw from across the cabin. Shaw had joined the diplomatic team as a security advisor, but he was also an old friend of Owen's, known for his practical, no-nonsense approach. "We don't want to keep our hosts waiting, do we?" "Right," Owen said, shaking off his nerves. He stepped over to their gear locker and began loading portable translation modules into their carry cases. Each device was a carefully calibrated marvel of xenolinguistic engineering designed to pick up even the faintest nuances in alien speech patterns. If only the modules could teach him to stop feeling like an amateur on his first field assignment. "You're sure you've got the cultural primer memorized?" Owen asked, only half joking. Shaw shrugged. "I know the basics. Don't interrupt their gestures, don't use our standard salutes, and try not to stare at their head crests." He tapped his temple. "It's all up here, document. You're the linguist, I'm just here to make sure nobody steps on diplomatic toes." Their conversation was interrupted by the ship's AI announcing their imminent arrival. Owen snapped the case shut and glanced toward the cabin door. "Ready as I'll ever be." The landing pad was a platform of iridescent metal that shimmered like a liquid rainbow. A delegation of Arinvians waited at the edge, their tall, slender figures bathed in the soft glow of the city's ambient light. Each one was adorned in intricate patterns of metallic fabric that caught the sun and reflected it in cascading hues. As Owen and Shaw stepped onto the platform, the Arinvians approached in measured, deliberate movements. A woman stood at the forefront of the group. At least, Owen assumed she was female based on his preliminary research. She was slightly shorter than the others, her ornate headdress less pronounced but no less elegant. Her eyes, large and luminous, regarded Owen with a calm intensity that made him hesitate. She extended her arms in a motion that was both greeting and inquiry. "Dr. Carver," Owen introduced himself, carefully mimicking her gesture. "This is my colleague, Lieutenant Shaw." Her voice was soft, with a melodic cadence that resonated in Owen's chest. "I am Elena. Welcome to Arinvia." Her words were carefully enunciated, but her accent made them sound almost like a song. Owen smiled, relieved that the initial exchange had gone smoothly. "Thank you, Elena. It's an honor to be here." He glanced at Shaw, who gave a short nod of acknowledgement. "We look forward to learning from your people." Elena's gaze lingered on Owen, as if assessing him. Then she turned and gestured for them to follow. "Come. We have prepared a place for you to rest and study. There is much we hope to share." As they walked through the city, Owen couldn't help but be awestruck by its design. The buildings appeared to grow organically from the ground, their flowing forms defying gravity. Bridges arched gracefully between towers, and glowing pathways pulsed softly beneath their feet. The air was filled with a faint, harmonic hum that Owen suspected was some kind of energy field, though he couldn't be certain. "Quite the place," Shaw muttered, his voice low so only Owen could hear. "Almost makes me forget how different they are." Owen didn't respond immediately. He was too focused on Elena's posture, the subtle movements of her hands as she guided them. Every gesture seemed deliberate, each step purposeful. "Different isn't bad," he said finally. "It's just different." Their destination was a sleek, circular building at the edge of a reflecting pool. Inside, the space was open and filled with soft, ambient light. Elena led them to a chamber with a central table surrounded by cushions. She gestured for them to sit and then motioned to an attendant, who brought over a tray of what appeared to be refreshments. "I understand," Elena began, her words slow but clear, "that our ways may be unfamiliar to you. We wish to bridge that gap, to understand one another." Owen nodded, his linguist instincts kicking in. "We're here for the same reason. We want to learn from you, to see how our two peoples can help one another." Elena's eyes narrowed slightly in thought. "Your words, not easy to translate, but I hear meaning." She gestured to her own chest. "I will try. My people will try." It was a modest breakthrough, But Owen felt a flicker of hope. He reached for one of the translation modules and set it on the table. "This device," he explained, "can help us. It records what we say and tries to find patterns, connections. With your permission, we'd like to use it to improve our understanding of your language." Elena tilted her head, her gaze flicking between the device and Owen's face. Then she nodded once. "Permission granted." Shaw leaned back slightly, folding his arms. "Well, that's step 1. What's step 2, Doc?" Owen smiled faintly. "Step 2 is finding common ground. Through words, gestures, anything we can share." The conversation continued, slow and methodical, with Owen carefully phrasing each question and listening intently to Elena's replies. They learned that the Arinvians valued harmony above all, seeing their city not as a collection of individual buildings but as a single, interconnected entity. Owen shared stories of Earth's diverse cultures, illustrating how humanity had found strength in its differences. Hours passed, and though their words remained stilted, a rapport began to form. By the time Elena rose to show them their sleeping quarters, Owen felt a small measure of relief. The first steps had been taken. He glanced at Shaw, who was scanning the room with his usual alertness. "Think we made a good impression?" Owen asked quietly. Shaw gave him a sideways glance. "I think we didn't screw it up. That's good enough for me." Owen chuckled softly. As they followed Elena down the glowing corridor, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of something much larger than any of them had anticipated. Owen rubbed his temples, staring down at the intricate patterns etched into the artifact on the table in front of him. The Arinvians had placed it under the delegation's care with the expectation that it might hold a key to deeper understanding. The object was a large disc made of a material that shimmered faintly under the overhead lights, its surface covered with swirling engravings that resembled language but defied all known linguistic structures. It was both beautiful and maddeningly opaque. "Any progress?" Shaw's voice broke through Owen's thoughts as the lieutenant stepped into the room. He carried a tray of what passed for breakfast in Arinvian cuisine, small, colorful cubes that tasted faintly of citrus and spice, and set it down next to Owen. Owen shook his head. "Not much. I've been trying to isolate a pattern, but every time I think I've got it, it changes." He gestured at the disc. "This thing isn't just decorative. It's meant to convey something important. I just don't know what yet." Shaw leaned over the table, studying the artifact with an expression that was part curiosity, part skepticism. "You're sure it's a language? Maybe it's just art?" "Maybe," Owen said, though his tone made it clear he didn't believe that. "But look here, these repeated forms. They're too regular to be random. And here, this part almost looks like a pictograph. It's like they're trying to show a sequence, a process of some kind." Before Shaw could reply, the door slid open and Elena entered the room. She greeted them with a slight nod. "Dr. Carver. Lieutenant Shaw. I hope I'm not interrupting." "Not at all," Owen said, motioning toward the disc. "In fact, we could use your help. This artifact, what do you know about it?" Elena stepped closer, her gaze falling on the disc. "It is old. Very old. Even to us, its meaning is unclear." She placed a hand on the edge of the table, her long fingers brushing against the shimmering surface. "Our scholars believe it holds knowledge from a time before records. A time when our ancestors spoke differently." Shaw frowned. "So it's basically a relic? A piece of ancient history you don't understand either?" Elena tilted her head, considering. "It is more. It is a reminder of something we lost, but also a guide, perhaps. A way forward." Her voice softened. "If we can understand it." Owen straightened in his chair. "Then we're on the same page. I've been working on identifying recurring patterns, but without context, it's like trying to solve a puzzle without knowing what the final picture is supposed to look like. Any insights you could share would be invaluable." Elena nodded slowly. "I can show you what our scholars have theorized. Perhaps together we will find meaning." She gestured toward a wall panel and an image of the artifact appeared in holographic detail. Lines and shapes glowed and annotations written in the intricate, looping script of the Arinvians hovered alongside them. "These markings," she said, pointing to a section of the artifact's surface, "may represent movement. Or change. Something that flows. Like a river," Owen said, leaning closer. "Perhaps. Or a cycle. A return." Shaw rubbed his chin. "So it's not just a record. It's a map of some kind." Elena hesitated. "Not a map in the way you understand it. More, a path. An idea of where we have been and where we might go." Owen's mind raced as he examined the hologram. If these symbols indicate a process, then it's possible the rest of the markings provide the context, who was involved, what they did, why it mattered. But we need a framework. Something to help us decode the grammar of this visual language. I can provide you with our oldest texts, Elena said. They may offer clues. But the language is distant. It will be difficult to translate. That's never stopped me before, Owen said with a faint smile. If we can find just one clear correlation, one matching concept, then we can build from there. Language is pattern recognition at its core. Shaw looked between them, his expression half amused. So, basically, you're saying this is going to be long hours of staring at symbols until something clicks. Pretty much, Owen replied. But it's worth it. If we crack this, it could be the breakthrough we need to really connect with the Arinvians. To understand how they think, how they've evolved. Elena's gaze lingered on Owen for a moment before she nodded. I will bring the texts and help where I can. Owen watched her leave, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. Shaw nudged him with his elbow. She's got faith in you, document. Better not let her down. Owen sighed. I just hope I'm as good at this as everyone seems to think I am. Well, Shaw said, leaning back in his chair, guess we'll find out. Let's get to work. Owen was crouched over a display, fingers tapping quickly on the glass surface as Shaw entered the small research chamber. The room, lit by a gentle, iridescent glow from the walls, was crammed with translation equipment, fragmented notes, and several holographic projections of the artifact's symbols. You're at it early today, Shaw said, setting a steaming cup of what the Arinvians considered tea on the corner of Owen's workstation. Owen didn't look up. Early? I haven't stopped since yesterday. Shaw's eyebrows lifted. Owen, you need to take a break. I can see the bags under your eyes from here. What are you even chasing now? Owen sighed, finally leaning back. He ran a hand through his hair and turned to face his friend. It's just, there's this one sequence of symbols here. He gestured to the hologram in front of them. They appear in multiple locations on the artifact. At first, I thought they represented a concept like time or change, but the patterns don't match that interpretation. I'm trying to figure out if it's something more abstract, like emotion or intent. Shaw sipped from his own cup, his eyes narrowing as he considered the glowing lines and curves. And you're trying to figure this out alone? Owen hesitated. Elena's been helpful. She brought me some of their oldest texts, ones that show similar patterns. We've been going through them together. Shaw smirked. So that's why you haven't left this room. Don't start, Owen said, though his tone was more tired than annoyed. This isn't about. Hey, I'm not judging. I just mean you two seem to have hit it off. I see the way you two work together. It's not just professional. Owen shot him a look. I'm here to learn their language, to understand their culture. Sure, Shaw said, setting his cup down. And if you happen to make a connection with someone along the way, is that so bad? Owen opened his mouth to reply but stopped when the door slid open. Elena entered, carrying a data tablet and a thin bundle of what looked like flexible sheets made from some organic material. She nodded to Shaw before turning her attention to Owen. I found an old account, she said, carefully placing the items on the table. It speaks of a time when our ancestors faced uncertainty. They left marks to guide those who came after. Owen leaned forward, intrigued. Marks? You mean like what's on the artifact? Elena gestured to the hologram. Not exactly, but similar. A way of preserving knowledge. A memory. Shaw glanced at Owen. So, it's like a journal? Not a journal, Elena said slowly, her voice thoughtful. It is more like a reflection, an impression of thoughts. Owen's eyes widened. If that's true, then these aren't instructions or historical records. They're conceptual. They're meant to make the viewer feel something, not just understand it intellectually. Elena nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. Yes, they are meant to resonate. Shaw folded his arms. Okay, but how do you translate a feeling into words? That's your job, right, Doc? Owen rubbed his chin. If I can isolate the structure, see how the symbols connect and relate, I can start to map those relationships onto human concepts. It won't be exact, but it could give us a way to interpret what the Arinvians are trying to convey. Elena watched him closely, her expression softening. You are very determined. Comes with the job, Owen said, smiling faintly. But I need your help. Your perspective. Without that, I'm just guessing. Shaw snorted. And let me guess, I'm just here to keep things from falling apart while you two figure out how to put together an emotional puzzle. Owen grinned. You're here to keep me sane. And to make sure we don't trip any diplomatic landmines. Good luck with that, Shaw muttered, though there was no real annoyance in his tone. For the next several hours, Owen and Elena pored over the old texts, cross-referencing the symbols on the artifact with the organic sheets she'd brought. They traded theories, tested interpretations, and occasionally paused to argue, though even their disagreements were tinged with a sense of camaraderie. It's not a direct correlation, Owen said at one point, his voice tinged with frustration. The symbol isn't just about loss. It's about continuity. Like something that persists even after it changes. Elena tilted her head. That is difficult to explain. Our language does not separate such things. They are one. Owen stared at the hologram, his mind racing. Then it's not a word or phrase. It's a concept that combines multiple ideas. That's why we're struggling. Our languages approach meaning differently. Shaw, who had been pacing, stopped and turned to them. So, you're saying we need to think less about what it means and more about what it feels like? Yes, Owen said, nodding. Exactly. If we can find an equivalent in human emotions or experiences, we can start building a framework. Elena's expression brightened. You are understanding. That is good. Owen glanced at her, their eyes meeting for a moment longer than necessary. Only because you've been patient with me. The tension in the room shifted, becoming something more subtle. Shaw cleared his throat. Well, it sounds like you two have plenty to keep you busy. I'm going to make sure our comms are still secure. You never know who might be listening. As Shaw exited, Owen and Elena exchanged a glance. He means well, Owen said, smiling. I see that, Elena replied, her tone warm. She turned back to the hologram. Shall we continue? Owen nodded. Let's keep going. Elena gestured to the new set of holographic symbols she had just projected onto the screen. Her voice was steady, though there was a noticeable shift in her tone as she tried out a few newly learned human phrases. This arrangement, is it meaningful? To your understanding? Owen leaned closer, studying the pattern she'd highlighted. Maybe. These here, he pointed to a cluster of interlocking shapes, look similar to the sequence we worked on yesterday. If that holds, then it might represent a transition of sorts. Like moving from one state to another. Shaw sat across the table, his arms crossed, looking skeptical. Are you saying this thing is some kind of instructional manual? Like a guidebook for emotional states? Not exactly, Owen said, shaking his head. It's more abstract than that. Think of it as a narrative, but one where the story isn't told in events or words. Instead, it's expressed through the relationships between concepts. Yeah, that's real clear, Shaw said with a smirk. I think you linguist types just like making things sound complicated. Elena tilted her head, considering Shaw's comment. Your friend. He doubts your methods. Not doubts, Owen said, glancing at Shaw. He just prefers things he can see and touch. The abstract doesn't come naturally to him. That's one way to put it, Shaw replied. I just don't see how this puzzle of yours helps us get any closer to actual diplomacy. The Arinvians don't need us to feel their ancient graffiti. They need us to understand their policies, their trade rules, their security agreements. Owen took a deep breath. That's true, but cultural understanding underpins everything else. If we can grasp what these symbols mean on a deeper level, we're not just translating language, we're bridging how our two species think. That will make every negotiation smoother. Shaw snorted. If you say so. I do, Owen said firmly. He turned back to Elena, who was watching their exchange with faint amusement. Now, let's go back to this sequence. What can you tell me about the context? Where did this part of the artifact come from? Elena gestured to another projection showing a faintly glowing map of an area Owen recognized as one of the central Arinvian ceremonial grounds. This fragment was found beneath the Great Spire. It is sacred to us, but its meaning has been lost for many generations. Shaw raised an eyebrow. Sacred but lost? It is difficult to explain, Elena said. It is as if we know it is important, but we have forgotten why. Slight nod. Yes. Shaw leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. Okay. Let's say we figure out what these symbols mean. What's the end game here? We tell you what we think they say. And then what? Owen answered before Elena could. If we understand these symbols, we can start understanding how the Arinvians view the world. How they process change, emotion, relationships. That can give us insight into how to approach them on everything else. Trade, security, science. It all ties back to cultural understanding. And, Elena added, It is not just for you. If you help us, remember, it will bring value to us as well. Shaw shrugged. Fair enough. I still think it's a long shot, but I'll play along. They spent the next several hours working together, cross-referencing the artifact's symbols with the ancient texts Elena had brought. The room was filled with a low hum of conversation. Owen asking questions, Elena providing context, and Shaw occasionally throwing in a skeptical comment or an observation that sent them down a new line of inquiry. Though their personalities often clashed, they all seemed to find a rhythm in the work. At one point, Shaw stood and stretched. I need a break. Anyone else? I could use a walk, Owen admitted. He glanced at Elena. Would you like to join us? Elena considered the invitation for a moment before nodding. A walk would be pleasant. The three of them stepped outside into the open-air corridors of the Arinvian city. The sky above was painted with streaks of violet and gold, the setting sun casting long shadows across the crystalline structures. The air was cool, carrying a faint, sweet scent Owen couldn't quite place. Shaw whistled low. You know, every time I step out here, I half expect to see something that doesn't feel real. This place, he gestured around them. It's like walking through a dream. It is a place of meaning, Elena said softly, built with intention. Owen glanced at her. Everything here has a purpose, doesn't it? Even if that purpose is long forgotten. Not forgotten, Elena corrected. Just waiting to be understood again. The three walked in companionable silence for a while, each lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Shaw broke the quiet. So, Owen, what's the next step? How do you plan to crack this thing? Owen shrugged. Keep going. Keep asking questions. Keep looking for patterns. Every time we find a connection, no matter how small, it gets us closer to understanding. Sounds like a lot of work for a lot of maybes, Shaw said, though his tone wasn't as harsh as before. Maybe, Owen replied, but if we get it right, it's worth it. Shaw grunted. You're the linguist. I'm just here to carry the gear and make sure nobody does anything stupid. Owen chuckled. And you're doing a great job. The three of them returned to the research chamber as the first stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Back inside, the holograms flickered to life once more, and they resumed their work, slowly, carefully, together. Owen leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair as the latest round of analysis scrolled across the screen. It's here, he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. I'm sure of it. Shaw looked up from where he was sorting through a pile of old Arinvian scrolls. You've said that 3 times today. Care to share with the rest of the class? Owen gestured toward the projection. This sequence, right here, these symbols aren't just abstract. They actually represent a progression. Think of it like a timeline, but instead of events, it's about transformations. Changes in perspective, shifts in understanding. Shaw squinted at the screen. I'll take your word for it. But what does it mean for, the actual mission? Are we any closer to figuring out how to work with these people? Before Owen could answer, Elena entered the room carrying a data tablet. She gave them both a polite nod. I have reviewed the interpretations you suggested, she said, placing the tablet on the table. They are intriguing. Perhaps we can expand on them together. Shaw raised an eyebrow at her. Sure, let's expand. But let me ask you this, if Owen's right about these being, what did you call it, transformations, how does that help us? What are we supposed to do with that information? Elena glanced at Owen, her large, expressive eyes softening. It helps us understand each other. If we can see how change happens in your thinking, in your values, we can better align our goals. Owen nodded, encouraged. Exactly. And it works both ways. By deciphering this, we learn more about how the Arinvians approach challenges, how they grow, adapt, and they. Shaw held up a hand. Okay, I get it. Still seems like a roundabout way to figure out trade agreements, but if you say it'll help, I'll play along. Elena tilted her head. Play along. It means he'll help, Owen explained quickly. He gave her a reassuring smile. Let's focus on the patterns you mentioned earlier. You said they appeared in your oldest texts, but also in the artifact. What do you think they represent? Elena hesitated, tracing her fingers over the edge of the data tablet. I think they show growth. Not physical, but growth of thought. Of self. Shaw snorted. You're talking about a self-help manual. Owen shot him a look. Not quite. More like a philosophical guide. Something that helps them and maybe us navigate changes in understanding. Well, Shaw said, leaning back in his chair, sounds like you've got a lot of reading ahead of you. Elena and Owen shared a glance. Not just reading, Owen said. We need to test this. If these patterns are meant to evoke certain ideas or emotions, we should try different combinations, see what happens when we interpret them one way versus another. Trial and error? Shaw asked. Something like that, Owen replied. He turned to Elena. What's the next step from your perspective? How do your people usually approach decoding something like this? Elena considered for a moment. We try many approaches. We look at context, history, at what is around the marks, and we discuss. Together. Owen nodded. That makes sense. If we combine your contextual knowledge with our pattern analysis, we might get a clearer picture. Shaw groaned. Sounds like a long night. Could be, Owen admitted. But if we can nail down even one consistent meaning, it's a step forward. Elena tilted her head. Forward to what? To understanding, Owen said simply. To finding common ground. The room fell into a steady rhythm. Owen and Elena traded theories, debating possible meanings for the symbols, while Shaw kept an eye on the data streams, occasionally chiming in with a practical observation. Though the task was daunting, the collaboration between the three of them brought a certain energy to the process. After several hours, Elena leaned back and touched her fingers together in a gesture Owen had come to associate with deep thought. This one, she said, pointing to a particular sequence of symbols. It means connection, not just physical but emotional. Connection? Owen repeated, mulling it over. He looked at Shaw. That changes things. If the core concept here is connection, then maybe the entire artifact is about relationships, how they form, how they evolve. Relationships, Shaw said with a grin. You two have been spending a lot of time on this. Maybe the artifact's just reflecting that. Owen ignored him, his attention still on the symbols. Connection, growth, change. It's not just a static record, it's a dynamic framework. If we can map these concepts onto human equivalents, we'll have a foundation for meaningful dialogue. And if we fail? Shaw asked, though there was less skepticism in his voice this time. Owen glanced at Elena, who returned his gaze with quiet confidence. Then we keep trying, he said, because that's what we do.